evolution means a change in a population over time. That's all it means. 45 million years ago, horses were the size of dogs. They actually had toes, walking around like this. And then over time, they start to lose their toes. Gradual process, but they start to lose them. It wasn't like they woke up one morning and lost a toe, the next morning they lost another toe. It was a gradual process. And pretty soon, they're walking around on their middle fingers, which is basically what they're doing now. It's the advantage of walking around on your middle fingers, really. Well, it's lighter. They can move faster. So horses can run fast because they don't have a lot of weight down there. And they've changed over these millions of years. They've adapted to their environment. So an adaptation is a trait that really increases an individual's chances of surviving and reproducing. So it's any trait. Remember, a trait is a characteristic that's passed on from one generation to another. It's genetic. And it's mind-blowing how they've adapted to their environments and why there are so many different species on Earth, because they've all adapted to different environments. Really, 6 main ways that evolution can actually happen. And the first one is mutation. So remember, mutation are really errors in DNA replication. Some mutations can be helpful. They help the individual survive. Giraffes, how did they evolve to have such long necks? We might have started with the mutation. So one of there was an error in the copying of the DNA that produced an individual that had maybe a slightly longer neck than another individual, and had an advantage when it had the longer neck because it could reach parts of the tree that the shorter necked giraffes could not reach. So that trait was an adaptation. There was an advantage to having a slightly longer neck than the others. And if a few of them had that mutation, they'd survive better. They could eat more, and they would breed more. And then that trait ended up being passed on. So the next generation had that long neck. And then even among those, some of them had longer necks than others. And eventually, those with longer necks survive more than those with shorter necks. And eventually, the long neck population is the one that survive, or the long necked individuals survive and reproduce more than those with the shorter neck. So they outcompeted. With the shorter necked individuals, they reproduced more, and then that trait was passed on from one generation to another. And eventually you have giraffes look like they are today, all with the long necks. But it all started off with variation in the population to begin with, right? And that to a mutation in the DNA itself. Okay, so the first way that evolution can happen is mutation. The next way that evolution can happen is through natural selection. We're going to talk a lot about natural selection and Charles Darwin. It really is stating that the best adapted individuals are going to survive and reproduce better than the less adapted survive. Right, so it's a competition. Nature is competitive. It's cruel, it's savage. Nature's savage, it's a beast. All right, but there's ways of competition for mates, for food, for water. There are certain traits that are better adapted than others. And just like I said with the giraffes, those that had longer necks, that was an advantage of that because they could eat more. They could reach food that others couldn't reach. And eventually, through natural selection, the population became increased, the lengths that had longer necks. So natural selection, survival of the fittest. This is the best adapted survive and reproduce, and the less adapted die out. It's either adapt or die. Nature's savage. Third way evolution can happen is through artificial selection. And this is man-made selection. This is when we select characteristics that we want to breed, such as dog breeds, horse breeds, animal breeding is done through artificial selection. We've picked what individuals we want to mate and pass on those characteristics to the offspring. So that's why it's called artificial, though, because human has interfered and has selected certain characteristics instead of nature. The fourth way that evolution can happen is through what's called gene flow. So this is when individuals enter a population or they leave a population. They come and go, immigrate, emigrate. And that is called gene flow. Species is a group of related individuals that can reproduce and produce fertile offspring. So fertile means they can have babies. So a horse, that's a species. A donkey is a species. But if you cross a horse and a donkey, you get a mule, which is a hybrid. A mule is not a species because they can't breed two mules and produce a mule. Very rarely are mules actually fertile. Most of them are sterile. A population is a group of individuals that belong to the same species. They live in the same place at the same time. So this is all same species, same place, same time. That's a population. And this is what evolution acts on populations, because if species live in different places, have different populations, they might evolve into different species because they're in different environments. If the environment's the same, they might not evolve into different species because they have the same environment. Right? The population of tigers, let's say, in southern India, you got a population of tigers. And in that population, if we were to look at just the genes in those tigers, the population's genes, total genes, that is called the gene pool. So the gene pool is a collection of genes in the population. So since we're talking about gene pool, we're going to look at a pool table. Each pool ball represents the individual. So this could be like the genes in one tiger is this pool ball. The genes in another tiger is this pool ball. The genes in another tiger is this one. So if we have a population of tigers, and instead of looking at the individual tigers, we look at their genes. So we're going to look at the gene pool of a population of tigers. And each pool ball represents the genes of one tiger. So 13, for example, are the genes in one tiger. Number 7 are the genes in another tiger, and so forth. And this is in a population of tigers. Okay, so right here, we are looking at the gene pool in a population of tigers.